I'd like to call to order the regular council afternoon meeting for Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Corporate officer, any late items? No late items. We have an amendment to the agenda. Corporate officer?
Yeah, so there's just an amendment to the reasons for going in close to add community charter section 91M or N.
M?
N.
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 Okay. Thank you. So if you got a adoption of the agenda as amended, please. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor? And that carries. Consent agenda. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Councillor Betts?
Thank you. I'd like to remove item, B from the SILGA resolutions.
Okay. And I'd like to remove C, UBCM meeting request. So we'll move those down to number 9. Anything else? Get approval of the consent agenda, please. Councillor Betts, Councillor Barkwell, all in favor, and that carries. So we'll move into delegations. We have 3 delegations today. First up, Mr. Brad Bessler.
Hi, Council. Brad Besler. I'm appearing here today on behalf of the Summerland Watchdogs, which is an informal group of Summerland residents who believe in holding local government accountable. Thank you again, Council, for the opportunity to speak as a delegation today. I was very disappointed when CAO Graham Stat tried to block my delegation request, so I sincerely appreciate you doing the right thing and overruling his decision. I would like to speak to the importance of community engagement, and that includes consulting with and actually listening to residents. But before I start, I'd like to address something else. The mayor has repeatedly singled me out during the public comment period, misrepresenting my actions and saying I make personal attacks. The mayor even cut off my microphone and interrupted me during the April 9th council meeting when I was speaking to an issue and concern regarding council not following.
Sorry, I'm cutting you off again. Okay, continue. Don't worry about the time. Continue.
Thank you. And on a related note, when I was at the new Peach Orchard Dog Park last fall, I was talking to one of the current councillors. We were having small talk and the topic of the district's decorum policy came up. And this councillor said, quote, Doug Holmes should have just kept his mouth shut and let you speak. And I agree, because here you are, you're doing it again. Now, I recognize that you are the mayor. You won the election and you deserve that respect. But that does not mean you are above the people of Summerland, because you're not. And I don't appreciate you continually portraying me as the bad guy. Because it's not just me who questions the decisions made by district staff, including those of Brad Dolovat. Councillor Barkwell recently raised questions about how the district continues to allow Thor Clausen to operate without permits. And I've also witnessed Councillor Patton be critical of Brad Dolovat multiple times during these council meetings. So I just want to be clear. I provide constructive criticism in a direct fashion, but my comments should not be seen as personal. I've also given you praise when it's been warranted. For example, everyone knows that me and Councillor Van Elfen won't be singing Kumbaya together anytime soon. But when he spoke up in these council chambers against borrowing $50 million for the new pool before the referendum, I was the very first person to thank him. And I meant it, because that was such a consequential decision for our community. I still find it deeply disturbing that the mayor, deputy mayor, and certain councillors had such tunnel vision that they were downplaying the serious financial implications regarding that. To expect Summerland residents to bear the full burden of over $50 million without any grants was beyond reckless. And now it appears council's focus has shifted to advocating for different stickers on fruit. Summerland residents are frustrated because we were not consulted on changing the garbage collection schedule from weekly to every second week. And that's a problem with this council. Major decisions are made without proper planning and foresight, without considering the different variables involved. And that brings me to two important words: transparency and accountability. Council even has those words written on the wall of these chambers as core values. But talk is cheap. Summerland residents are demanding that council actually start to show some transparency and accountability. And that starts with addressing the inconsistencies with what the CAO has told council in the media regarding his private pharmaceutical consulting versus what the evidence actually shows. Because there is clear evidence, videos and documents that show Graham Stat was using district resources during his district hours of employment for his private pharmaceutical consulting. And rather than address this apparent dishonesty from the CAO, it appears the mayor and council are covering it up. Does the truth not matter to you? Because it matters to me, and it matters to a lot of other people in Summerland too. So in the spirit of transparency and accountability, I am respectfully asking the mayor to publicly address this. The people of Summerland deserve answers. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions or comments council has.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? Don't see any. Thank you very much. Our next delegate is Sally Pierce, Destination Summerland.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for accommodating me today. And we have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just wondering how that works. Pardon? I'm here today to talk to council about the relocation of the Summerland Visitor Centre. As we know, it has been in its current location on the highway for many years now, and the general habits of the travelling public have changed. And whoops. Ooh. So the Summerland Chamber of Commerce and the District of Summerland have agreed it is time to bring tourism services to the heart of the community and modernise approaches to keep up with a changing tourism sector. The Chamber-owned building and district-owned land have been put up for sale together, with the Chamber using its portion of the sale to relocate into a new downtown location, and the district earmarking its proceeds for tourism-related ventures. The rest is just more that was put in the press anyway. I took some of this from the press release. So I'm here today to talk about the future location of the visitor centre. The main objective is to drive more traffic to the downtown core and to the businesses. I personally watched the traffic fly by on the highway last summer, and while people do stop in and we direct them to the businesses and to the downtown area, many people just drive by or will stop in purely to use the washrooms. So moving forward, we just felt it was really important to freshen up the approach and really drive more traffic to the downtown. So the important next question then is location. Brad and I met on Friday and went through some options that could and should benefit all parties and add to the downtown arts and business district while appealing to the travelling public. And we narrowed it down to 3 locations. The first location that we thought would work really well is on Prairie Valley Road, and it's the site of the former Sadie building. When we looked at it initially, access, because of the way the traffic comes in off the highway and around the roundabout and back down and into that site, initially we thought that could be a challenge. But when Brad and I talked about it, really, it doesn't pose a challenge. I mean, traffic direction can be changed further down the line, but I think it's also important to provide a good site and good parking and encourage the traveling public to walk to the downtown core. You know, we don't want to direct cars necessarily. It's better if they come and look at the visitor center and park and walk. So that's an ideal location, really. And the parking area by the badminton building we talked about as well. And also, when I did this PowerPoint, I think I got the third area incorrect. I think the third area is the parking lot by the dental center, just across from the roundabout there. That's all these sites are district-owned land. But I think that parking area by the dental center is quite well used by residents. So maybe that's not ideal. Now, so what does the building look like? And this is only a suggestion. There's many other options that we can research if if we feel that that's the right direction. So I used to work for Canadian Pacific Railway, and we ran a beautiful vintage fleet out of Calgary. And so I called one of my former colleagues and said, wouldn't it be really great if, because of the history of the Cabot Valley Railway, because of the Cabot Valley Steam Railway located here in Summerland, it's such a draw. Wouldn't it be really interesting if we could relocate one of the business cars and house a visitor center in it? And they said, yes, actually, Sally, the Killarney is not being used. It's our former crew car. And they would be open to, they asked for a formal proposal, which I needed to put the idea before Mayor and Council today, before I go to the steps of doing the formal proposal. But they talked about equipment donation, and they talked about how important the history is. And they said what they didn't want to see is it just left, hiding away in a museum. So I explained that it would be the home of the visitor center, and that the history, not only of Summerland, but of British Columbia and Canada itself, would be told and kept alive by, visitors coming. And we feel it would be quite a draw. The theme matches well with the Kettle Valley Railway history and the current Kettle Valley Steam Railway. The Kettle Valley Railway was built between 1910 and 1915 under the direction of Andrew McCullough. And he was the chief engineer for Canadian Pacific Railway's line in the southern interior of BC. And then CPR officially took over the KVR operations in 1930. The Killarney was overhauled 5 years ago. It has a vestibule, lounge, seating area, counter, 4 bedrooms that could be turned into offices and a washroom. And that was taken in 2004. I was actually hosting that trip. And the Killarney, so it's a 1950 diesel locomotive, and the Killarney is the second car in. Sorry, I know I'm getting out of time too, but and these are just more visual shots, just to provide a little bit of a visual, because it's not a caboose. It's a fully maintained Canadian Pacific Railway business car. And there it is. Very cool. Thank you. And some of I've just left some printouts of the possible sites that it could go, and I will just leave them here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any questions? Councillor Markle.
What are the difficulties in moving a rail car by highway to location in Summerland? Like, how much would that cost?
I know that it's a good question, and I have been in conversation with the now past president of the Kettle Valley Steam Railway, because they've done this before, and they moved a locomotive from Kamloops to here. A locomotive is going to be heavier than the business car, but the business car is not going to be an easy move either. And it was a significant investment. He talked about a cost of $50,000 just to move it, and it's not a small sum of money. There's no doubt about that. But also, if we were to buy a lot or buy a building downtown, it would be more than that. The other attraction of the old Sadie site is that when I met with Tom Burley with Kettle Valley Steam Railway, he explained that you need space because you need cranes to be able to put it into position. And so, that site actually does give that space.
Thank you. Councillor Peak.
Thank you very kindly. I think this is a very interesting idea and rather innovative, and it also gives a profile to both the chamber and the community. I look at the Sadie side, I mean, that had washrooms there, maybe that kind of thing is easier to connect into, but a continued discussion would likely be had. My question would be, has the chamber council itself approved this whole idea? Is that why we're working through here?
Thank you, Councillor Peake. Yes, they have. They're in full support, and it's unanimous to exploring the option if it works financially.
Thank you.
So would the rail car house both the tourist office and the chamber offices, whatever the chamber need? It would become the chamber of office, and it would be suitable year round.
Yes, Mayor Holmes, absolutely.
Councillor Barker.
Sort of a comment and a question. I think it's, the Sadie location sounds terrific. It's sort of far more attractive than an electrical transformer. What do you need from us? A resolution of support of some kind, or?
Yeah, when I thank you, Councillor Barker. When I put the formal proposal together, I've been in discussion with CP Rail. They were very excited about it being lived in. You know, there's so many of them that just get left, really, and they were excited about the theming with Summerland and with the history of the Cattle Valley Railway. So they were quite excited, but I wanted to come to council before I put together a formal proposal, because if mayor and council are not in agreement, because it's going to have to be housed on land, on district land. And if you're not in agreement, then obviously I'm not going to put the official proposal together. So I just wanted to come before you beforehand.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for the proposal. I think it's a really exciting starting point. Absolutely a really good transition for Destination Summerland. My questions would be more, I think, on the staff side of things, just trying to have a better understanding of a potential site such as Sadie, former Sadie site. Are there considerations to be made about future electrical transformer needs at that location? I don't know if we have the right person in the building to
CM.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Betts. It's something that's come up in the discussion, and it's one of the reasons why we kind of like that site as well, because this is so portable and that, you know, you could pick it back up with a crane and move it in that future context. We aren't going to need those lands for a long time for that expansion, so they'll otherwise be vacant and underused lands.
I think generally council seems pretty supportive in principle. I think it's just a matter of working with staff and once it gets closer to becoming a rally, I guess staff would come back with a report and we take it from there. Yeah. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm excited. I like the idea. I like the idea of the train car. I think it's a really unique, you know, it's been done in different locations, but I think it's ideal for our community. But I don't know. I just really like your option 3 by the museum. You know, I thought there'd be some really neat synergy between the rail car and the museum, and, you know, people stop, you know, to get information, and there's the museum. So, I mean, I think there could be some really great synergies there, but I'm open to all the proposals at this point in time. I just think it's a really unique and a great option that's ahead of us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Helfen. We looked at that site as well, and I love the idea of working in partnership with the museum and with the art gallery. I think it would really strengthen the, you know, working together is far better. I know that the museum has plans for an expansion, and I think primarily that was one of my first choices as well. But I really don't want to inhibit their expansion, because the Killarney, it's not small. And so the practicalities of traffic sight lines and of possibly interfering with the plans of the museum. And I have spoken to the museum about this. The nice thing about the Sadie site is it's close enough. But if there's a site closer to the museum, that's great too.
Yeah, it's possible there might be other locations we haven't thought of. So we can do some brainstorming on that. Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much then.
Thank you.
Our next delegate, Peter Chu, Unisys School, please come on up.
Dennis, good afternoon, and thank you for providing another opportunity for us to come back and share with you what we've been doing at the school. Before I get into the formal part of the presentation, I'd like to welcome Andy Oakes, Mr. Andy Oakes, who's president of the Okanagan Hockey Group. We are striking a partnership with them, and I'll be talking about that. I've invited him to come and share this opportunity with us as I talk through some of the things we're thinking about in terms of moving forward with some of our initiatives at the school. Okay, it's up there. Okay, good. Okay, great. Okay, just a quick update on what's been happening up at the school. I had talked about last time I was with council. I talked about providing an opportunity for us to engage in a more comprehensive way with members of the community. We'll be hosting our Generations Over Dinner. If you recall, we have introduced this concept around multi-generations and getting the generations to come together to talk about things that are important to grandparents, to parents, and to students. And so we plan to hold that dinner. It's coming up in the summer. Invites will be coming out to everybody. The second item I want to highlight on is getting our grade 11s and 12s involved with some community service. Here we are working with the CFSO, the Community Foundation South Okanagan. They have completed a survey called Vital Signs. A number of outcomes from that survey, a number of very interesting findings. And they have a documentary called Uncharitable, which is talking about the challenges facing charitable organizations as they try to raise funds to move their vision forward. Our students are involved in helping them with that, and Unisys will be hosting a dinner and a discussion. And I believe invites have been sent out to council as well as other members of the community for participation there. So we invite for you to come and join us for that. We also, in light of the recent announcements around school restructuring in the community, we've been reaching out to different community groups, parent groups, inviting them to come up to the school to visit with us, to explore alternatives to education for the children. So we've been doing some open houses. The last one, we had about 60 families join us about a month ago up at the school to learn more about what we have to offer. So those are some of the initiatives. We'll continue to introduce and launch other initiatives to welcome the community up into the school. The other major initiative I'd like to update is the academies. These are sports academies we've developed for students and for families in the Okanagan. Just briefly, we launched the hockey academy and the ski academy this year. If I go to the second slide here, I'll give you a chance to see some of the results. We had 17 students participate in the hockey and 19 students participating in the snow sports. These are all local families from the Okanagan. As a result of that interest, we've established a partnership with OHA, and this is why Andy's here today, to provide a Hockey Canada sanctioned skills academy to families that are interested in the hockey. Our kids did a great job this year. It really brought hockey, minor hockey, if you will, excitement back. We were very successful this year. Our kids participated in a number of tournaments, both within the area and also in the Lower Mainland and across BC. and came back with very exciting results. The results are not the important thing, it's the participation and the engagement and bringing our opportunities to our families and to our students. That's what we want to do. So moving forward, one of the things we really want to do is increase the number of community partnerships. And so here introducing Andy today, we want to talk a little bit about our relationship with the Okanagan Hockey Group. Internationally, we've just signed, I was in Asia in March, and I signed an agreement with PPSC, which is one of the largest providers of hockey tournaments around Asia. And they've committed to bringing international teams to Summerland to participate in showcases. This will allow our players, our athletes here to engage with international teams. For the community, would be bringing obviously visitors during the summer and the winter months to come into the community here. And branding Summerland, I think, as a destination with those parents, with those groups, I think would be very worthwhile for us. On the snow sports side, we're now partnering with KR Academy. Our very own Christy Richards is heading that initiative. And then we're partnering with Apex as well in terms of creating an alpine ski academy. And we hope to be able to report back to council achievements there. Some of our young athletes this year has done a really good job skiing at very high levels within the province as well. Now, this brings me to sort of our request today. As many of you know, our facilities are hot in demand. Our facilities are ice, the facilities are arena during certain times of the day, while it's underutilized in other parts of the day. And we know that fiscally, that's a huge burden on the district to the tune of about $250,000 a year to operate in the deficit for that arena to operate. What we're proposing is that with the partnership and what we're doing with hockey, that we can have a look at a better utilization of that facility. To help it financially, but two, to support these partnerships and these community events that we want to host. Without certainty to facility access, we can't really market internationally these events. We certainly cannot sign up more families into the academy without some type of a guarantee that we would be able to get access to facilities. So what I'd like to ask for council to consider is to have the administration bring together community groups that are using the facility to have a meeting, to have a discussion around better utilization of the facility. We are willing to serve as anchor tenants for the times of the ice that's not fully utilized. This is during the day when nobody's using the ice. We would be able to use that time with our academies and make better use of that time. We would like to discuss extending the ice into the summer months and having some type of allocation policy that would benefit the community as a whole. That means bringing international tournaments here, bringing families from outside of the area to come into Summerland. I think it will do a great job for tourism, and it would bring a lot more traffic and business into the downtown core. Now, we're also developing some facilities up at the school that we would love to share with the community. Traditionally, we've rented out our gymnasium to community groups. We are in the process of putting in new lines for pickleball courts, indoor pickleball courts for groups here in Summerland and in South Okanagan to use those facilities during the winter months. Our gym, like the ice facilities, not used during certain times, and that's on the weekends and after school. And that's the time that I think we can make better use of that facility. So we're not asking for something that we don't do ourselves. We think that facilities can be much better utilized that way. In the fall, we're in the process now of planning and putting in dry ice facility, which we would make available to obviously the hockey groups here for shooting practice and for training up in the school as well. And we're in the process, as part of that ski academy, acquiring a couple of trampolines that would be beneficial for gymnastic groups. And we welcome other schools, other groups to come and use those facilities. So in summary, and I'll ask Andy if he has anything to add to specifically to the ICE facility usage and the optimization of that, but we would like to ask that council move an initiative with administration here to look at a better way of allocating, a more efficient, effective way of allocating the community resources, both for financial and as well as service to the community reasons. Andy, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, council, for having us and having myself. Obviously, we operate down a little bit, 15 minutes south in Penticton in the facilities there. Our partnership with Unisys is one that is maybe going to be something new to the community of Summerland, where the vision is for us, during the school year, there will be, the in-school hours of instruction, between 8 and 3 o'clock, when most facilities are a little bit quiet. And I think that's some of the ice time that Peter's talking about. But I think for communities like this and a partnership like this, there's also new initiatives. And I think that's what he's talking about and around booking processes and what have you, because, we're talking about bringing, groups from different parts of the world into the community here. We want them using your facility. We don't want them using down in Penticton. We want them here in Summerland. We want them maximizing that, having the junior B team that just vacated and the dressing room space and some different opportunities that you have here in the community. I think it's an ideal time to look at the way that ICE is either booked or handed out. One of the things that Okanagan has done since our inceptions down in Penticton in 2001 is we've always committed to not take ice time away from the local minor hockey associations. And so we use the ice times that are readily available. And I think that's what Peter's trying to get across here today is we're not trying to take ice time away from current user groups. It's just a way of reorganizing it, planning so that you can have better utilization, but then also be able to work on new projects that might benefit the community.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Council questions, Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I think it's really interesting, the opportunities that you're talking about. I would like to note that the daytime user groups aren't only minor hockey, but it is all of our elementary students come and use the ice during the daytime during the week. And that actually was a bit of there was a bit of friction this past year because our just public school students received less ice time this year because there had been some established bookings. So that actually was something that came up. And I think it would benefit to have a more fulsome discussion potentially with the administration and with staff to have a more predictive planning methodology. And I think that could be beneficial to everybody. Just noting that our public elementary school students do use that space, and how can we work together to kind of have a plan for that on a longer term basis? Because I can definitely see that if you want to attract new international clientele, that takes long-term planning. And I understand that. So, I think there's room for a discussion there to help maximize the ice time usage, to be able to bring some more dollars into the community. So I think there's a few different factors, of course, how we charge out our ice for nonprofits versus for-profit organizations. That's all part of the discussion, how that works. I think that would be important to consider. But overall, I can support a discussion about this. Absolutely.
Councillor Van Elsen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned that in Penticton, you try to work with minor hockey, not using their ice time. The ice time that you are allocated, are you getting a discount?
In Penticton? No, we're a part of the rates and fees that are approved by council every year with the city of Penticton. Okay, Councillor Peak.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Mayor. I think the opportunity to provide openings for profit, nonprofit, I'm not sure what your school is, and international groups to come to Summerland and to look at how it might be integrated that would still benefit us and the groups that would be coming, while allowing such things as our students to be able to do the times and that work within our school system would be good. I think the opportunity to change what we're doing in terms of maybe extending the ice time in the summer. I'm not involved in any of this, so I would have to look to staff. And then there's a cost involved in extending all that, but maybe there really is an opportunity, and different models in life create vitality and enrich a community. So I think the opportunity to have those discussions is really valuable, and I look forward to seeing what those discussions might come to. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly. And just to add, besides the schools, we'd have to be able to accommodate the homeschoolers and the old timers and everybody else who does use it. But certainly if there's empty ice during the days, then totally open. If there's better ways of organizing ourselves, then it's worth looking into. So I guess CAO, we would just ask you to continue speaking with staff and see what you guys can come up with. Yep. I don't see any further comments from council, so thank you very much. Thanks for the update. Yep. Move on to the public comment opportunity for agenda items.
Hi, Council. Brad Besler. I'd like to speak to agenda item 7.1, the Council Procedures Bylaw Amendment. Based on my experience and observations in these council chambers, the current process, including delegations, public comment at the beginning of the meeting for agenda items, and public comment at the end of the meeting for any issues or concerns affecting residents, is working great. The mayor has repeatedly talked about the importance of democratic institutions, and providing the public the opportunity to directly address council is an important part of that. Let's be real. The only reason this procedures bylaw is being debated today is because CAO Graham Stat tried to block me from appearing as a delegation. And why did he do that? Because of his contempt for me and his contempt for accountability. At the last council meeting, when I was approved to speak as a delegation, Councillor Peak emphasized how important it is to listen to residents. And this includes listening to residents regarding issues or concerns that are not included on a given council agenda package. If public comment is eliminated at the end of council meetings, in my view, it will show council also has contempt for the people who they are elected to represent. So I hope that's not the case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, any agenda items like to speak to? Okay, we'll move on to our business items. 7.1, Council Procedures Bylaw Amendment. Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. So an initial draft amendment to the council procedure bylaw has been prepared in accordance with the direction from council at the previous meeting, and staff are seeking clarification on other amendments on the following topics before bringing the final amended bylaw back for council's approval. We have a short presentation that will lead council through the drafted amendments, as well as potential additional amendments for council to consider. And I thought it would be best maybe after each slide, we could get the direction from council if needed or if any on that specific section. So the first section is in relation to Bill 44. So staff are recommending wording changes to the bylaw under the public comment opportunity to provide further clarification to council staff and the public to ensure that the opportunity to address council is not used to hold a de facto public hearing for those applications where a public hearing is no longer permitted. So the wording will and does reflect, you can see it in the attached draft amendment. We have included this one, that members of the public are not permitted to address council on any matters on the agenda where a public hearing is not permitted to be held or is waived in accordance with the Local Government Act. And like I said, this amendment has already been included in the draft amended bylaw attached. So if there's any questions about this, I'd be happy to take them now. If not, we could keep going.
I think this is eminently sensible. The processes are being put forward through the Local Government Act, but also through the province. And I think it's important for us to follow suit on this. So thank you for bringing that into our bylaw.
We don't really have a choice. Okay, carry on.
Okay, so the second section is to focus the public comment opportunity to business items. So based on council direction at the April 29th regular council meeting, the council procedure bylaw is to be amended by removing the second public comment opportunity, which was to address council on any matter, on any local government matter, not to anything specific on the agenda at regular council's meeting. So this council direction has been included in the draft council procedures amendment bylaw, and the draft further amends the wording on the remaining public comment opportunity to clarify that only those items listed as business items may be addressed during the public comment opportunity. And this is only to formalize the current practice that takes place. For the afternoon meeting, this would reflect items identified in agenda item 7, business items. And for the evening meeting, this reflects items identified as item 9 on development reports and business items. So staff did conduct a thorough review of municipalities in the Okanagan Valley. We looked at Penticton, Oliver, Osoyoos, Peachland, West Kelowna, Kelowna, Vernon, and Kamloops to compare council procedure bylaws regarding procedural rules or public question or comment opportunities. So there were similarities as well as differences between the opportunities, and they are as follows. So not every municipality offered a public comment or question opportunity. West Kelowna, Osoyoos, Kelowna, Vernon's was a bit difficult to understand. The council procedure bylaw was a bit unclear, and the council meeting watching them was also a bit. So between 3 and 4 of the looked at municipalities didn't have a public comment opportunity. Most of them had the opportunities limited to comments or questions related to only those items on the agenda. There was a time limit per speaker and an overall time limit on the opportunity. These did vary from municipality to municipality. Penticton's is the same as the District of Summerlands. And with that, we are happy to take any other direction or answer any questions on the public comment opportunity if council has any.
Thank you, council. Any questions on this? We can always have more at the end
Yep.
in our discussion. So
Yep.
just carry on.
And so the third section would be delegations. So what we found was that the current council procedure bylaw permits delegations, but provides limited guidance, which creates ambiguity for staff and the public when considering delegation applications. The district's current practice is to schedule 2 to 3 delegations per meeting, and the bylaw states that each delegation is permitted 5 minutes to address council, that the topics must be within the jurisdiction of council and not regarding a bylaw in respect of which a public hearing has been held, where a public hearing is required, or where a public hearing is required under an enactment as a prerequisite to the adoption of the bylaw. So we looked at other municipalities, again, the same ones I mentioned previously, to compare council procedure bylaws and the procedural rules regarding delegations. And what was found is that each municipality offers delegations with various procedural rules. The similarities and differences are, again, as follows. So limit the maximum number of delegations per meeting. So our bylaw is unclear. A lot of the other communities would permit about 4 delegations per meeting. So if council wanted to do 4, 2, 3, 5, whatever, we'd be happy to take any direction on that. Restrict the topics on which delegations may present to council, including those matters not within the local government interest, not on a bylaw which a public hearing has been held or is to be held or is required or is not required. Or if the purpose is to address an issue which is before the courts or on which council has authorized legal action. So with that, there's further amendments that are in line with the provincial guidance on best practices and other municipalities to delegation procedures. And so we would be looking for guidance to further define the restrictions on delegation topics. So again, our bylaw is unclear, and these would be on subjects that do not fall within the jurisdiction of a local government, bylaws where a public hearing is to be held or required not to be held in accordance with the Local Government Act, matters subject to legal proceedings where a judgment has not yet been given, publicly tendered contracts or proposals that have not yet been awarded, staff or labor relations, applications, permits, or licenses not yet considered by council, information in closed meetings, or the promotion of businesses. So that could be one amendment. Another amendment would be to provide either the CAO or the corporate officer the delegated authority to direct delegation requests of an operational matter to the correct staff member. So we do sometimes see delegation applications come in that can be dealt with at a staff level as they are operational and don't need to come before council. Limit the amount of delegations permitted to address council at a council meeting. Again, that could be 4, that could be 2, it could be 3, whatever council considers appropriate. Council could limit the amount of times a delegation may present to council, either annually, biannually, and the amount of times a topic may be presented. If we have a hot topic item in the community, you could see with the removal now of the second permitted or second public comment opportunity, we could see many delegations of on the same topic. So it would be having just one delegation come forward, and then the second delegation or third delegation, however many received, could just be forwarded to council for their information. Or council may consider moving delegations to the committee of the whole meetings rather than business meetings to support time management in the regular meeting. So if council has any questions or wants to talk about delegations, we'd be happy to do so now.
Okay, thank you. So you probably want some direction on this one.
Please,
Yeah.
if any.
Anybody want to start? Councillor Pate.
I think the idea of limiting the number of delegations in a particular meeting is a good one. And the fact that people submit what they're going to be doing is also helpful. If there's a lot of redundancies or there are things that can be addressed operationally, those things all make a difference. And I think that I'm looking at the amount of material that we do in any given meeting, that a maximum of 4 delegations on a meeting I think it would work. So that would be a suggestion.
Okay, we got 4 on the table. Anybody want to raise that? Councillor Parkland.
Yeah. Yeah, I think 4 would be a maximum. My question is about delegations. Currently, an individual isn't really a delegation, right? And CEO Stat was just following policy when he referred it up to council. For Mr. Besler to speak, because now we will have to change our policy if we take away we still want to have, I think in the future, the opportunity for individuals to address council. So I didn't see in this, but I haven't, I sometimes I miss things when there's 200 pages. Changes to our policies so that individuals could address, and then council as a delegation, and how many times a year that person, an individual, might address council, because maybe we don't want every week a delegation from an individual.
So through the chair to Councillor Barkwell, so what we've done is it's been a matter of practice, I would say, rather than written down. Delegation isn't defined in the council procedure bylaw. So we have only permitted organization or community groups. To my understanding, that's always been the practice. It's been the practice since I've been here. And before that, that was what my understanding was. So council could make that more clear should they want to permit individuals, community groups. We could actually define what a delegation is. Would probably be the easiest way if that's what you'd like.
So when we were discussing whether to allow Mr. Besler as a delegation or not, it was talked about how do you determine what's an organization and what's not an organization, and I mean part of what prompts I think some of what's here is why do we have to define it? Why don't we just allow anybody who wants to be a delegation, and then you don't have to make these judgment calls. That's kind of my perspective. If an individual wants to be a delegation, let them be, right? So then you don't have to worry about that. Councillor Marco?
Right, that's where I was going with that, yeah.
Councillor Bett.
And through the mayor, thank you for the discussion. I think it's interesting because we're trying to be, like find efficiencies in the discussion and in our policies and procedures, which does make sense to me. And especially because we're obligated to review how we function because of the legislative requirements through Bill 44. So those make sense. But if we're just going to allow anybody who wants to come and speak to council to come and speak to council as a delegation, as an organization or an individual, I just don't see how it differs all that much from the public comment opportunity. So I'm just trying to rationalize what's the best move forward for a sensible business meeting that propels us forward, and still making sure that our residents can effectively communicate with council. And of course, they can always request to be a delegation. You can submit correspondence to all of council at any time, and call into Municipal Hall and speak to staff on operational items. So I'm still just trying to garner the best approach forward, taking into consideration what other communities are doing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we kind of, do we have a general consensus on 4 delegations per meeting? Yeah. Okay, and then for the idea of moving committee of the wholes, that doesn't make too much sense to me. I think it's better that it stays in a regular meeting. And committee of the wholes can be just as busy as regular meetings, so that's neither here nor there. And anybody else have a view on that? Councillor Betts?
Just that, pardon me, thank you through the mayor. The only other one that I can recognize that we were talking about was the council schedule, either from amalgamating the meeting from the afternoon and evening meetings into one meeting versus separating public hearings onto a different day. And personally, I would not prefer public hearings to be on a separate day. I think that as council members, it's a part-time job, and it's not reasonable that we could be expected to be for any number of public hearings in the evening time, additional to our responsibilities already.
I think the corporate officer was going to speak to that next.
Okay.
But we were just on delegations. So, and anything else you need on delegations there?
So just if council wanted to do, so we talked about the maximum, if there was any further restriction or defining restrictions of delegation topics, if council wanted to limit what could come forward. So the difference with the delegation and public comment opportunities, we don't have control over what people are coming. We don't know why they're coming. With the delegation is they would actually have to fill out the application. So we would have an understanding of what that topic or what topic is to be discussed. So it is helpful. Like, for example, we wouldn't want a delegation coming up and talking about a employee or labor relation. So, having those abilities for staff to say, no, we've been provided the delegated authority that these are the only topics or these topics can't be discussed would be helpful. But again, that's at the discretion or up to council. So that would be one we are seeking direction on. If council wanted to limit the amount of times people or delegations are permitted to come to council, that's another consideration. So maybe just those two points.
I think for the topics, what you have listed there makes sense. And I don't know if it's possible to have this in, or if this is just policy or you have in the bylaw or not, but if they have slides, if we can get them in advance and so that they're not, so the first time we see them isn't at the actual meeting, and that would be useful too. That might just be a policy thing rather than a bylaw. Councillor Van Alphen.
What's everybody else's thoughts on frequency, like quarterly, or I just looking for input on that.
Councillor Peak.
What I would think for most delegations that if the opportunity came up every 6 months, most of our delegations have they're an organization, they're collective people. I don't know, maybe every 3 months. So if you came in a 3-month period, then you could come in the next 3 months period. Maybe that's the way it could work. Because you don't want to, we want to hear from the public, then there are other ways for them to give us their ideas or their comments. And if it was on a 3-month rotation, so you could come every 3 months to discuss things about your organization or whatever, I'm wondering if that might make things work smoothly.
That's, yeah, Councillor Beth.
For me, I differ with that with delegations. The majority of the organizations that I have had the benefit of experiencing typically have organizational reasons that they're presenting to council, and that doesn't come up typically more than twice a year. So for me, I think keeping delegations to 2 times per year would be reasonable for each organization. That's my thought.
Councillor Barco.
That's true, what Councillor Beth says, but we're also changing the nature of the delegations to include the community input on a wider variety of things. And so I would think, we've had people speak on different topics, maybe even once a month, which so I would lean towards why? Yeah, I guess we need a Summerland solution. We're not Vancouver where if you open it up for everybody as much as you wanted, each meeting would go on forever. But also, so we don't necessarily need to limit too much in Summerland because we don't have a whole lot of people. But maybe I'd go more than twice a year. Like up to 4 times a year or something.
Okay, well, quarterly, Councillor Melton. Okay, I think that's quarterly would be kind of general consensus here. Sorry, Councillor Benz. Okay, and I think that's it for the delegations, eh? So moving on to the council meeting setup schedules.
And the last thing that we are seeking direction on is during the review of other communities, staff reviewed the meeting structure of each municipality's council meeting to compare with the district's current structure to ensure the efficient use of council time and effective decision-making. So one option for council to consider, and which would be staff's preferred option, is council may consider amalgamating the afternoon and evening regular meetings into one meeting. Attachment 5 in the council report is a draft agenda of what this would look like on today's meeting should council go forward, just so you can put some context and be able to see it. So council could choose to implement an amalgamated afternoon evening meeting and to adjust the order of business items to one meeting. Another option that we've seen and wouldn't be our preferred option, but is something council could consider, is to adjust meeting times on regularly scheduled meeting days. So you could move committee of the wholes to the afternoon, close could be before the afternoon, like the regular meeting, public hearings move to a separate date. So it's really up to council. This is a lot of other communities are following option 1. So you'll see that they all take place in the afternoon. There's often a recess. If a public hearing needs to be held, they'll go into a public hearing at the set time, usually 6 p.m. And then they will reconvene into the evening meeting. For staff perspective, this is actually only one agenda we have to publish as compared to the multiple that we're doing now. But it doesn't change the meeting too much. It just actually looks more at staff's time in producing the agendas and getting the material to council.
Thank you, Councillor Peak.
Well, I definitely don't think option 2 would work very well for us. If I look at option 1, where you're amalgamating the afternoon and evening meeting, oftentimes, because we're serving the public, there are items or topics of interest that the public wish to attend. So often, I sometimes look at the evening meeting as being the business meeting, and that the topics there are ones that the public may be more interested in. And when I look at the working public, I want them to have an opportunity to be available for that kind of a meeting. So I'm wondering if we changed it to one meeting, so it's a running meeting. We may have a break and then we come in back in again at 6 o'clock, but it starts in the afternoon. Whether those items would then be available for the evening meeting. If this makes sense, what I'm trying to explain.
I think, you know, in the past, when we've discussed this, the important thing is to keep the development items in the evening. That's where, you know, you get, I mean, maybe with Bill 44, it doesn't really matter now, but that's where you get that public interest and the neighbors want to know what's going on and everything like that. And so I think so that nothing changes in that respect, really, with the option one. The development reports are in the evening, and we can, if we're, I mean, this never happens, but if we're really ahead of schedule, we can just call a recess, or, I mean, we don't have to keep going. We just call the recess at 4 like we would anyway, and reconvene at 6, you know, to ensure we can just always make sure the development reports are in the evening. So. Councillor Betts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do know that with the merging of the afternoon and evening meetings, that the mayor and CAO's reports move to more so the afternoon time as compared to the evening time. Just for interest's sake, I know that, you know, you guys are the highlight of the meeting, of course, our 6 o'clock meeting. You launch off the evening meeting. I wouldn't want it to get lost. No, you guys often share important operational updates and what we've been up to from the mayor's desk with the province. And so actually, I think those are both really important reports that I would want to make sure the public would hear.
So what we could do, what they do at the RDS, is they have the chairs and CAO reports at the end, just before the council reports. So, you know, I give my report and then any councillor can give their report. So we could do that. I don't know if it really matters whether, you know, I'm not sure if people really care when I give my reports, to be honest. Councillor Betts.
Well, it's just, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just through with the draft proposed agenda, it looked like the mayor and CAO's reports would come after, you know, they would come after our agenda items, and then before the delegations, like where would the recess ultimately come in the longer agenda proposal? May I ask, corporate officer?
So through the chair to Councillor Betts. So this is just a draft. If council wants to move anything, that can be done. So the recess would take place. It would be almost as if we didn't go into a separate evening meeting. So once we went into in camera, the closed session, the recess would take place following that. So the order of the agenda, other than, I think we didn't move anything other than the mayor's and CAO's report. It would be very similar than to those two. The things you would lose in the evening, so when council reconvened, there would be no second consent agenda, as all the items in the consent agenda would be dealt with at the beginning of the meeting, should it be only one meeting. Bylaws for adoption, we wouldn't have two separate bylaws for adoption. They would all be considered at the first, which would be the afternoon one now. But you would still do public hearings if needed. It'd be bylaws from the public hearing, following a public hearing if we needed, development reports, business arising from committee of the whole or closed sessions, notice of motion, council reports. So the recess would be similar to if we were to recess at about 4 p.m. So when the afternoon meeting essentially now is over.
Sparkle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at it, the sample agenda. And if somebody wants to comment on something that's in the evening meeting, they would have to come to the afternoon meeting and make their comments and then come back in the afternoon or the evening, I should say, and sort of watch the discussion and such. I don't know if that's such a good approach. Could we have another opportunity to speak to items on the evening agenda that is in the evening? Yeah. If we had just one sort of overall agenda.
You want to tell her? Or do you
So
want me
through
to?
the, I can try, then you can jump
Okay.
on. So through the chair to Councillor Barkwell. So this was drafted in accordance with the direction we've already received from council, which is to get rid of the second public comment opportunity. So yeah, so if if a member of the public wanted to speak on any matter of the agenda item, they would have to speak, they would have to come to the beginning of the meeting. More often than not, in the evening meetings, people cannot comment on an item because there is that legislative component. You'll see the DVPs, temporary use permit, zoning, OCP, things like that. So I would say probably at least, I don't want to put a number to it, but a majority of the time, there's not a lot you could speak to on the evening meeting. Should council choose to add a second one, that's at the discretion, but this has been drafted with the previous council direction if council were to go this way.
Yeah, and I would just add, it's all designed to have the development stuff in the evening. And this is where you can have the de facto public hearing, you know, so it's a way to ensure we don't have that, to conform to Bill 44. You know, so so if you put all the stuff that you can comment on in the afternoon, then, and all the stuff you can't comment on in the evening, then that kind of becomes moot. Councilor Barkwell.
Well, there seemed to be a lot of silence there, so I thought I'd pitch in and say, if that is indeed how it's going to work out, I'd be willing to give it a try. But, you know, it seems like every few years they're changing the procedure bylaw anyway. So, you know, give it a whirl and then see how it works, because it's always a adaptive procedure, I think, here. We do things.
Okay. Anyone else? You got all you need there, Corporal?
Yeah, if you just give me 1 second, I'll get a resolution up
Okay.
on the screen.
And this will come back to us to look at the future meeting, right?
So we plan to bring forward the draft amendment bylaw at the June 11th meeting. That's our anticipated goal. It would then go for first, second, third reading. We would publish public notice, and then it would be adopted at the July 2nd meeting, with any changes then occurring at the July 23rd meeting, I believe. No, July 23rd. Yeah, so it's yeah, June, July. I believe that captures it, but happy for council to review and provide any wording changes, should there be any.
Does that work for everybody? Okay, someone like to bring that forward? Councillor Van Alphen, do I have a seconder? Councillor Peak, any further discussion? Councillor Betts?
I thank you through the mayor. I think I would just like to put it out there that, you know, I'm willing to, like you said, it's an organic, flowing document and trying to learn how to best run our meetings in the most efficient way possible while still giving the public an opportunity to connect directly with council. So I think that I'm willing to give this a go. And if we need to make further tweaks, that is always possible to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any other further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? And none opposed. That carries. Moving on to 7.2, the Aquatic Center roof update. Director of Community Services, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The roofing project to replace an east section of Summerland Aquatic and Fitness Center roof, which has been leaking, was initiated in late January. Due to sections of water damage and rot discovered during the removal of the shingles, as well as corroded fasteners, the roof work was stopped, and the roofing contractor engaged an engineering firm to provide the District of Summerland an assessment of the roof and repair details. The engineering firm conducted a walkthrough of the roof area to determine the approximate area of roof decking lumber that has decayed and to assess what is needed to be replaced. The engineering firm recommends replacing the compromised lumber around the perimeter of the roof, as well as sections within the roof deck that are decayed, and they have provided the structural details for the repairs. The engineering firm recommends wire brushing and treating the fasteners with a zinc-rich primer to address the corrosion observed on the fasteners. A vapor permeable air barrier was placed to protect the roof while the assessment report was finalized and the cost estimates were calculated. Staff are seeking council approval to increase the project budget by $240,000, including contingency, and to issue a change order to the roofing contractor to complete these recommended repairs prior to completing the roofing project. The recommended funding source is through the Growing Communities Fund Reserve. Should council approve this budget increase, the lead time for supplies is up to 12 weeks and is estimated that the repairs will take a minimum of 2 weeks to complete. We would target the repair work to take place during our annual shutdown, which typically starts the last week of August. So we would be looking at extending the pool shutdown probably from 2 weeks to 4 weeks and having the shutdown start August 10th. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you. So extending the shutdown period by an additional 2 weeks will not affect the fitness room.
Through the mayor to Councillor Van Alphen, we would look to that portion would only be for the pool shutdown, and we would have our fitness room open for the other 2 weeks. Potentially, we might even just shut down the fitness room for 1 week if we, depending on the work that's required, but it wouldn't impact the fitness room closure.
Thank you.
Councillor Peak.
If I might ask from our CFO, how does this change what we have already decided on with the Growing Communities Fund?
So through the mayor, great question. Councillor Peak. During 2024 budget, council had allocated the full complement, I guess, of funds in that Growing Communities Fund. A large portion was earmarked for the Deer Ridge Sewer Project. Now, with the district looking into the OBWB SFPA grant, it's a 16% grant. There's that possibility that we've now freed up about $600,000 to $700,000 worth of Growing Communities funds. So that is why we are recommending that we allocate this portion of funding through the Growing Communities Fund, as we have now got more funds because we're going to get another grant from OBWB.
Supplemental? When do we find out if we do get that grant? I know you're working on it.
So through my conversations with OBWB, they're looking at approving that in October.
Okay, I had another suggestion. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not going to justify why I had the suggestion or whether we could, should, might, whatever. We have spoken about putting $100,000 to Peach Orchard for enhanced parking, Peach Orchard Park. And I wonder about any opportunity of deferring that spending and using that portion towards this project at the pool, which gives us a little more of the growing community funds to use elsewhere.
Councilor Sparkle?
I don't see why we would want to do that. I'd say that maybe we'll have to deal with it later, but I think that this grant, $600,000 from OBWB is pretty near assured. So, yeah, what the CFO has presented is, I think, the preferred way. We'll still have is the grant from OBWB presented as a reduction in the cost to the participants? Yeah, it's good because.
Yeah, so during our presentation at the open house for the Deerage Sewer Project, we did have two sets of slides for the public to look at. One was if, the grant wasn't to ever come into fruition. And that were the original numbers that were presented to council way back in, I think, December or November of last year. And we had a secondary set of slides where we took the 4.5 or the $5.4 million project cost, and we reduced it by the 16% grant, and then flowed all the calculations through that as well. And one thing I did forget to mention, so apologies for that. Another reason why we do have additional growing communities funds is we do have a landowner that is willing to put forward their proposed committed funding for the sewer project at the beginning of the project as well. So that's also freeing up some of the district funds that we'd have to utilize on this project. So it's those two components that are increasing that reserve.
Councilor Betts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question actually would be for Lori and possibly Mike over there. So, talking about the roof of the aquatic center, and clearly every time we lift up a shingle, we're going to find something new, unfortunately. So my question is, how much of the roof is being replaced with this proposed plan? And I mean, ultimately, do we foresee the need to repair the entire roof structure on that building? Do we know that answer?
Through the mayor to Councillor Betts, the section of roof that we are dealing with right now is the cover that is over the pool basin. So it's the east section. There are additions to the building that are newer that we do not need to repair or replace at this time. I can't tell you how long it'll last for, but it is potential down the road to have to deal if there is future damage. I don't know, Mike, if you have any time estimate on the other sections of the roof and how long it might last? No.
You good? Yeah, follow up.
Thank you. Just, so I guess, understanding that there's different portions of the roof, with this repair, even if it's augmented with the funding, will that replace that whole section, or is it just one part of that section? If that makes sense.
Through the mayor to Councillor Betts, if I'm understanding you correctly, the actual repairs of the roof are the areas with rot. And so those sections will be replaced with new lumber. So we're not doing new lumber on the entire section, but the entire section of roof will have new shingles and new roofing on it.
Councilor Barkle?
I mean, the bigger question is not, gee, another section of roof another year. We could put $200,000, $250,000 into this and then the boiler blows up. I mean, that's just the way it is. I think as the building gets older, the repairs and maintenance costs go up. And so we should be prepared that we're going to be putting considerably more into repairs and maintenance every year for that building. And there also is no building at all. So someday we may have to draw the line. I don't know. But it's not hard to put an extra $250,000 for the roof and hope we get another year out of the building.
We'll have a better idea once that report comes, I suppose. So, yeah. Yeah, well, it's the way I look at it is we didn't get provincial grant for a new pool, so we might as well use the provincial money for for the old one. Yeah, motion forward, Councillor Van Elfen. Could we just get up on the screen there, Steve? Seconder, please. Councillor Betts, any further discussion? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, through to Lori. So this new replacing the lumber and replacing the shingles, and now they're, if I'm not mistaken, they're looking at creating an air gap between the two surfaces. And now that's where the mistake was made once upon a time, many, many years ago, where they just laid shingles on top. There was no air gap, no chance of the humidity escaping anywhere except for rotting through the wood. So this should give us some good life on this new eastern portion of the roof, if I'm not mistaken.
Through the mayor, to Councillor Van Elfen, that is the intention of this design, is to put strapping down so there is air that can flow between the two surfaces and reduce the humidity buildup in the facility.
Thank you.
So you're correct.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. That carries. 7.3 Fall Fair banner. Who's going to take that? Corporate officer?
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. So the Fall Fair Committee is requesting to hang a revised street banner for the 2024 Fall Fair as noted in attachment 2 in their report. As per the district street banner policy, any changes to the banner requires council direction and approval. This request and banner is before council for consideration.
Okay. Any questions? Anybody want to bring a motion forward? It's pretty straightforward. Changing a word. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts. Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. And moving on to the BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement. Director of Finance, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the District of Summerland's transit system is operated through BC Transit, and we annually sign an operating agreement with them for this service. The 2024-2025 operating agreement is in front of council today, and it is comparable to our historical agreements. Overall, the agreement reflects $9,485 increase when we compare it to last year's agreement. The primary reason for the increase relates to increased operating costs such as fuel, vehicle maintenance, and insurance. In addition to the increased operational costs, the budget provided by BC Transit takes into account just over $39,000 in transit revenues. And now as council has approved free transit to Summerland residents, this revenue projection should be removed to reflect the true budgeted cost of this service, which is $266,693. And the district's overall 2024 budget for transit is $270,000, which is sufficient to ensure this service continues throughout the year. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Second, Councillor Betts. I was just wondering, how do they calculate the potential budgeted revenues for fares?
I wish Odessa was here for that question, but historically they've looked at ridership, they've looked at historical revenues that we've received over the years, and they just kind of try to factor all that in.
Because they don't really, I mean, you don't know what the ridership would be if it wasn't free. That's the thing.
That is
So
correct.
it's based on the free ridership,
Yeah.
which isn't necessarily accurate.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed, that carries. We're ahead of schedule, so we'll just keep moving on before we can, climate action reserve spending. Our sustainability coordinator, please.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So today I'm going to be presenting a report from staff on behalf of the Community Climate Action Advisory Committee, or the CCAC. This was requested to bring back to council following a request from council about back in April 2023. To examine and provide some recommendations on how to spend the Climate Action Reserve Fund. So this report will just go over some of the high-level reasons for why looking at our reserve fund is important, the intent of it, and then some of the recommendations from that committee. So just some background, going all the way back to 2009, the BC Climate Action Charter was put into place, and to date now all municipalities in BC have signed this. The signatures basically confirm that communities in BC were committed to reducing corporate emissions, as well as looking at working towards carbon neutrality and creating complete compact communities. So shortly afterwards, the program CARIP, or the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program, I apologize for all the acronyms, was formed as a way to distribute funds to these BC signatories. That included both local governments and modern treaty nations. So between 2009 and 2020, that program operated, and every year municipalities would have to submit emissions reporting, and whatever expected carbon tax was to be paid, we would get it back. So for the district that was looking between $30,000 to $40,000 was then put back. And as a result of that, the district created a reserve fund in order to put those funds into a reserve to specifically be used to meet the mandate and requirements of that BC Climate Action Charter. So between that time, we've had changes in the provincial government as well as climate programs. So with the Clean BC Roadmap to 2030, there were some new changes to what's expected for local governments to meet emission requirements as well as adaptation. So in 2021, the CARIP program was stopped, and a transition to the Local Government Climate Action Program, or LGCAP, began. And that basically did the same thing, but it increased the funding for all the municipalities and signatories. So instead of about 30 to 40,000, we were getting about 121,000 and change from the government in order to work towards these climate action targets. So what's the intent of those funds? So in addition to meeting those BC Climate Action Charter mandates, we're also now required to work towards the provincial goals of the BC Roadmap to 2030 and that climate preparedness and adaptation strategy. So we're looking at both emission reduction through emissions and energy efficiency, as well as adaptation for communities. And that all ties back to creating complete compact communities and looking at our buildings, transportation, industry, etc. So based off of that, we have a policy that the District of Summerland has put together in order to ensure that we are able to spend those funds accordingly and to provide further guidance for council and staff in order to spend them. So those annual funds are received each year following our emissions reporting, and then whatever we receive just goes right into that reserve, and then we can spend it as needed according to those policy guidelines. So every year we're receiving these funds, goes into that reserve. And we have that guidance from the policy. So we've had that policy since 2010. And since that time, we've done some revisions to it based off of changes with council, changes to the CARET program, and now the LGCAP program. So most recently last year, I came to council and we revised that policy to better reflect the work that we've done both at the community level and at the corporate level for climate action. We've recognized the corporate and climate emissions plan, and we've also updated it to better reflect the LGCAP program and its intents. So our first priority is to prioritize and reduce emissions, both at the corporate and community level. And then the second priority is to build up knowledge. So whether it's through reports or assessments to help us better understand those particular climate issues or problems or refer projects that we're working towards. Third priority are those that result in emission reduction or adaptation, but as a secondary component. So while they're not primarily emission reduction or primarily an adaptation project, they may result in secondary adaptation and emission goals being met. And then not part as a priority, but we do allow, and it is allowed as per the LGCAP program, to cover 50% of staff wages for those who work directly with climate and sustainability work. So in my case, that would be applicable to me. So based off of what we know how to spend it and how we have been spending it, I'm not going to go through all these, but just an example of how we have spent the funds over the years. There is a bit of a gap between 2010 and 2017 just due to incomplete records that I couldn't find, but I imagine there was probably some spending in between there. So some key projects here is we've helped fund that integrated solar project. We've helped towards EV charging stations and some of the community work there. We purchased an electric Zamboni and put some funds towards that. More recently, we've helped fund the climate hazard risk and vulnerability assessment, as well as doing some replacements for windows and doors at the works yard. So based off of all that, where those funds come from, the intent of them, as well as how we are expected to spend them, both from a provincial mandate level as well as our policy, I worked with the CCAC, and we came up with they came up with some ideas, I should say. I was more or less a note taker at that point to determine the best ways to spend and use the funds. So we looked at the council strategic priorities for this year, for this term, looking at projects that have already been prioritized or things that could help support it. And then we've also looked at our corporate and community emission reduction plans or management plans and guiding the discussions that way and where we're already looking to target emission work and other adaptation and climate work. So based off of that, I've created 4 categories. So the first 2 here are active transportation and climate resilience. This is kind of how all the actions fell under. And in Schedule A of the staff report, it's all fully detailed out. This is just strictly for some high-level discussion. But yeah, looking at using some of the funds to help implement the future active transportation plan, which is currently being undertaken. Supporting for additional bike infrastructure and creating a bike funding program. So that would be directed towards supporting local businesses and commercial spaces to put up accessible bike racks and storage facilities in and around their businesses or buildings. And that would be all for public use. And then we also have biannual, so twice a year, Go by Bike Week events that we reach out to the community, we target schools, and we hand out prizes, and we encourage biking. There's also an opportunity they suggested that we could support and put additional funding that way, so we could extend that out with our celebration events and our engagement with the community. So the next one is climate resilience. So implementation of the adaptation plan. So once that project gets started, the idea is that the committee would see it as feasible and functional to use the funds to help implement any of the actions that come out of that plan. As well as advancement of climate mitigation work. So this being mitigation and adaptation work. So looking at addressing climate hazards, things that came out of both the adaptation plan and our climate risk assessment. So whether that is in education and awareness or actual projects itself, there's a lot of room to grow for that. We also had discussions around Fire Smart, very topical with the drought and the fires from last year. Knowing that we have a part-time Fire Smart coordinator, the committee suggested that we instead support a full-time coordinator at some point, whether it's this year, next year, and preceding years. Then there's also the development of green infrastructure design guidelines or the implementation of green infrastructure across existing bylaws. So either we hire someone to build out an entire guideline that can actually be applied to all of our development and planning, or we have staff with consultant support looking at revising any of our policies or bylaws that relate to subdivision and development to implement green infrastructure across it and have that expert there. So putting funding towards those two possible projects. They're tied together, but two different kind of results depending on whether council wants to proceed. So the last two are additional sustainability staff. So they felt it was pertinent and to include additional staff support to address sustainability and climate work. So the first one would be a full-time staff member here at the district. A second me, or a better version of me, that second half. So someone that would provide support in addition to my current position. There is also options with Fortis BC to address energy work with Fortis for their community energy specialist. They largely provide funding, but the funds could be just used to supplement any additional funding requirements or employee benefits and work like that. So they would be specifically brought on from Fortis BC, and they'd have specific targets and goals and projects that they would work on, and they would work directly with existing staff, and we would put a case together for that. Then there's an or we could work with the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions. They're an organization that connects undergraduate or graduate students with work in local government or other industries, and they specifically come on for a specific project, provide support, and it works basically as an intern. So we would provide financial support for that, in addition to the Pacific Institute, who would also supplement some of those funds. Lastly, we're looking at food security. Knowing that we have the food hub, they felt it was important to address food as well as the risks that we've seen with the flooding, the fires, the landslide, cutting off of transportation. So looking at doing a food security strategy or assessment. A good example is the city of Penticton, who did one a couple of years ago. So looking at ourselves to see what gaps and opportunities there are within the community to address food security and how we can maybe make ourselves more food secure. Which is also a great adaptation approach. The other two are looking at community gardens and supplementing the community to grow their own food and support them that way. So the first one would be looking at either providing funds for the expansion of a community garden or the development of a new one with the intent to engage with existing community garden groups or existing nonprofits and other organizations to partner with them and provide funding and support. Or we could just do our own, find some plot of land that we currently own and look at creating a district community garden. And then you have people who come in and use it by a yearly or annual basis. The last one is funding for private food gardens. So instead of it being kind of like a public community garden, we instead issue something like a grant to an individual community member, and they would be able to use that towards building out their own food garden in their own backyard on their private property, in addition to working with nonprofits that could help support that as well. So with those recommendations in mind, just a quick financial overview. So since the LGCAP program has been in place, we've received 2 annual installments of $120,082. So in 2022 and 2023, we received that installment, and that went directly into the Climate Action Reserve Fund. As of March 31st, we did actually receive a 3-year installment. So instead of doing annual ones, the province decided to instead deliver that 3-year lump sum to all the communities in BC. So everyone received their equivalent of 3 years in one go. So that is currently in the Climate Action Reserve. With that being said, it's estimated that at the end of 2024, based off of that installment, as well as pre-existing projects that are slated to use the Climate Action Reserve Fund this year, we'll have $673,229. We have annual up to about, I think, 2027 or 2028. We have expected expenses that will use it. So each year there's a progressive amount taken out but for pre-existing funds that we're using for staff wages. Based off of this lump sum, we are asked by the province to spend most, if not all of this by March 31st of 2028. So the two staff recommendations based off of this is that we ask that council provide and select a few of the funding options, and that we can then go and examine the cost and feasibility of implementing those to get more secure numbers that we can bring back to council for their review and then eventual approval if that's the case. The second recommendation separately from that is that the staff consult with district departments to develop even more recommendations. At this point, we've really seen more of like a community-based approach to this reserve spending from the Climate Action Committee. So going to staff and looking at the departments and how we can plan for the future and what would be a great way for us to implement the funds even further, both from a corporate and community perspective. We would like that as well. So those are the two recommendations for council's consideration. And thank you very much. And I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? Councilor Betts?
Thank you for a very thorough presentation, Odessa. It's a really important topic because we're talking about how we can do investments in our community and kind of long-term investments that are actually going to make significant differences in how our corporation has emissions. And so for me, when I was going through them, I could see where the advisory committee came, but I definitely feel like as council, we could hopefully narrow those down a little bit more. So with the active transportation plan, I thought using some of the funds to support the active transportation plan, I think that would be sensible in helping support user groups or businesses having bike racks. But I think it's important to differentiate between bike racks and storage for facilities for bikes. And there's a hugely different price tag. So for me, I would not support building infrastructure for people to store their bikes inside buildings, but I would be absolutely enthralled to have more places to lock up bikes downtown. I think that would be an asset, and around town. I think that would be more than needed. Is it okay? May I continue? Yeah, I just had a few thoughts on this because I've been thinking about them. So as far as adding additional staff, I mean, I'm reluctant to add staff. Right when I started on council, I remember thinking like, you know, I really want to honor the fact that these funds are there not only for reports and moving forward our vision, but to actualize this vision and to see reductions in concrete ways and via projects. And so you present with to us so many useful projects, and I'd really like to see some of those come together. Specifically down below, I saw mention of the wastewater treatment plant and the water treatment plant, and those seem like pretty amazing opportunities to look into reducing our emissions. So that's more where I'm leaning, is looking at supporting concrete projects that we already know about at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Pete.
Thank you very kindly, Your Worship. A very good report. I really appreciate that and how you present it. You're always so enthusiastic, which is fabulous. I want to look at the active transportation, and I know some of the points are on biking. I'm wondering if we could use some funds towards our walking trails. There's some improvements that could be done there, and we already have things on the go. There may be some other opportunities to improve those walking trails. So I would like to maybe include that. I, like Councillor Betts, are not particularly interested in hiring more staff, but I would like to see good projects move forward. When I look at the food security and gaps or opportunities or expansion into community gardens, and whether we do it ourselves or whatever, I would like you to take the opportunity to speak to the food bank, because they have a coordinator for the Seed to Feed project, and they had an opportunity to have more lands, but we don't have enough people working. We have to have more support for a part-time person to help us do. We couldn't expand with what we have. Just really difficult. So maybe there's a way to support the community garden work that is always already part of that project. So maybe that's an opportunity. And that would help some gaps, would help fill some gaps within the community. And it would be in a way that the community is already supporting, which I think is important. And that particular project has had more community support this year from other gardeners and other farmers. I was interested, I'm not quite clear what you might do with it, but the part-time seasonal intern through Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions, and you might look for a specific support, whether there might be a particular project. The synergies on that kind of thing I could see, because it's probably done on a contract. It's not hiring a person. I think that could be really useful and a good way of using some of the funds and working through the kinds of things that you're already working on. Those would be my first thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your report. When you were talking about food security, creation and expansions of community gardens, funding for private food gardens, was there any discussion or just a suggestion possibly? There's a lot of young farmers out there, or wannabe farmers, that are the young agrologists, let's say, that are looking for land in a desperate way to start farming on a full-time basis. There's a lot of vacant agricultural land in Summerland that's not being utilized. What about possibly trying to get a communication out there that there are people willing to lease this land on a long-term basis, which would help again with food security? Possibly.
Yeah. Yeah, from my part, I agree. I'm not keen on using this money to hire additional staff. And along the lines of what Councillor Betts was saying, I think it's important. I think we should use this money on projects that we're going to be doing anyway. That there's a business case for them in their own right, and we shouldn't be doing them just because we have some money that we need to spend. And so I would like to see us go to the departments and see what they have in their budgets and for that this money can be used for. That's it's a way of putting it, making it operational. This money is part of our for what we set out to do. Anyways, we have we as a council are attuned to taking climate action anyway in our budget discussions and everything like that. We're always thinking about it, and so I think all the departments already have projects which would fit in with this kind of funding. So so that we're not having kind of make work projects. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like your approach. It sort of builds is better than what I was thinking. I was trying to think of the projects myself, yet staff are more intimately familiar with what's going on. I'm thinking, but when it comes to mind is South Victoria or bike lanes. It fits under active transport. I don't know where the funding stands right now for bike lanes and various components of that, finishing off South Victoria, but that's one possibility, I would think. And staff would, I think we need to go to staff for there and then make some choices.
Councillor Beth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, when I was reflecting upon the category 4 food security, I found myself feeling a little uncertain on on the district support of these kinds of programs when I know there are community gardens out there really supported by community organizations, right? That are being done by churches and where people can access these spaces. And I really think that instead of the District of Summerland creating programs, sometimes being able to support what's already in place. Maybe sometimes it's as simple as they need additional irrigation support or finding a way just to support organizations, initiatives that are already in place, rather than us starting a whole new program that will be just administered and sometimes deep in policy and procedure. So sometimes I think it's best to support what's already going on. So I'm hesitant to support number 4 as well.
Can we use this funding for partial grant and aids for climate action projects that community does, or does it have to be money? It doesn't have to be money that we're doing. Does anybody know?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'd have to look back and see if we can implement it as a grant, kind of like what we do with some of the other community funds. I can't see why we wouldn't be able to. Technically, it's our money to spend. But just in case, I'll double check. But I doubt there'll be any issues, but I'll check.
So moving forward, maybe the resolution should just be number 2. That we can ask staff to consult with district departments to determine the projects that could be funded. Would that work? Yeah, moved by Councillor Van Alphen. Does anybody want a second? You seconded? Okay, and then Councillor Peak?
Well, if we're looking to support some projects that are already, or organizations that are already doing things, that motion doesn't get there. Is the direction under that with the discussion we have? It doesn't have to be in the motion.
We could, I presume Odessa has that noted, but Councillor Van Alphen?
No, I agree with that approach, this approach number 2 there, that staff consult with the district departments to determine additional projects that could be funded. I'm sure they got long wish lists, and that's part of our, strategic priorities. Leave it up to the departments to come back to us and say, hey, we wanted to do this or we wanted to do that. I don't think we have to look too far externally. I think we probably have enough internally that we could spend the money on, personally.
Yeah, I don't think the word additional should be in there. It's really existing projects. I mean, we just can remove that word altogether though, doesn't it? Just determine projects.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. That's the one I said initially anyway, so. Does that work? And then the staff can still look into whether we give grants, and which would presumably come under the grant and aid process, but we could just have an extra attachment to that, right? The budgeting process anyways. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say, I think that's a really great idea. Having community projects that people could come forward with and a climate related community project, I think would be really strong, and we could get behind that quite meaningfully.
Okay, I'll call the question. We have quorum, yeah. All in favor? None opposed, that carries. Do we want to break or do we want to plow on? Break? Okay, so break for till 3 o'clock? Okay. Item 7.7, bylaw notice enforcement. Who's taking this? Director of Development Services, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm before council today to present proposed bylaw amendments to two bylaws. The first being our bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, and the second being our ticket information utilization bylaw. These are our two ticketing bylaws that we utilize for bylaw enforcement. The bylaw notice enforcement is referred to as bonds for the form of tickets. While the ticket information utilization amendment bylaws refers to MTIs as an acronym for a different form of ticketing that usually goes the court route, like a provincial ticket versus bonds. And I can explain more if there's more questions on the differences between those two different streams. But primarily what we're here in front of council to do is to make some administrative amendments to these two bylaws in light of the new solid waste management regulation bylaw. There has been recent amendments to that bylaw. That's bylaw number 2018-018. And every time you update a section in the a regulatory bylaw, you may have to also amend the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw as well as the ticket information and utilization bylaw because of the section numbers that are in this bylaw, in these two bylaws, referring to those regulatory bylaws change with those amendments. So it's always a good idea to review these two bylaws following a large review of a regulatory bylaw, such as the zoning bylaw that's going to the evening meeting tonight. So because we're opening up a review of these two amendment bylaws, we actually looked at a number of sections of this bylaw and did a bit of a comprehensive review of these two bylaws to ensure their accuracy, improve clarity, and also correct formatting. And we've also are proposing fine increases for select areas of the two bylaws. There's attachments for the formatting changes that show with redline version what's happening. We're trying to just improve the usability of the bylaws, both bylaws from both staff's perspective as well as the public's perspective, understanding the different charges and where they're getting their charges from, which regulatory bylaws. For fine amounts, most of the changes are increases that are happening with various regulatory bylaws. So the traffic bylaw, the fire and life safety bylaw, and as I already mentioned, the solid waste management regulation bylaw, there's more significant increases happening for those three regulatory bylaws. Some areas of the building bylaw and business licensing and cemetery, as well as zoning bylaw, are also included. The main intent here is to bring us in line with neighboring jurisdictions for fine amounts, as well as to improve the effectiveness of the issuing of a bylaw offense notice to ensure that people bring their properties into compliance. So as a tool for enforcement. So with the ticket information utilization bylaw, typically in review of other jurisdictions, these fine amounts are much larger than a bylaw notice enforcement a notice. The reason being is that an MTI takes much more staff time to prepare. As well, the appeal process goes through the provincial court system versus an adjudicator, which is a little more straightforward. That we have a shared adjudicator in Kelowna that we partner with other local governments in the Okanagan with. So for those two reasons, usually there's a greater fine amount, and as well, the provincial legislation allows us to have a larger fine amount for MTI specifically, while bonds are limited to a maximum of $500 as a maximum for bylaw notice enforcement. So for that reason, MTIs are also proposed to be increased. We don't use them that often, but when we do, we want to ensure that it's an effective tool to try to achieve compliance. So usually this is a second layer of enforcement following the issuance of a bylaw offense notice that, they haven't listened to us. So now we're going to put a much larger type fine on the individual with an MTI. And if that's appealed, then it goes through a court process, and that's fine. We can go through that process. There's 2 draft amendment bylaws provided for council's benefit. I'm happy to take any questions on that, but I'll turn it over for questions now at this time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions? Don't see any. So the province just recently increased the limit on the MTI, correct? So have we taken advantage of that? Is that, and I was never clear if that was just for short-term rentals or for anything.
Yeah, thank you for that question. They did recently increase the maximum, and primarily it was because of short-term rentals. I think it was based on feedback they've heard from other local governments that the fine amount wasn't significant enough when you have an operator willing to charge $400 or $500 a night with that type of a fine amount. So they responded by increasing the fines only for MTIs, and we have reflected that change in our proposed amendments. That is the only violation that we are recommending to go to $3,000. Everything else is much lower than that for the operating of a short-term rental business without a license.
Okay. Councilor Betts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I from what I'm seeing, these are reasonable increases and done with research and backing by your department. And so I'll bring the staff recommendation forward.
Okay, do I have a second? Councilor Peak? Any further discussion? So these are these kind of in line with, say, Penticton and other communities then? That's kind of how you got to?
Yeah, and they are these amendment bylaws, or sorry, these bylaws haven't been amended in some time. From our perspective, we did pieces of them when we would review certain bylaws, like I think the building bylaw, we updated a couple sections. The responsible dog control bylaw, we did that one as well at a different time period, but we haven't really went like full circle in terms of the entire bylaw and looked at where our fines relate to other jurisdictions. And we did that this time around, and that's why you're seeing lots of changes here, but they are bringing us in line with other local governments.
Okay, thanks. Okay, no discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Items removed from consent agenda. We'll go to the SILGA resolutions first. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to bring just community attention to the fact that a number of our resolutions that the District of Summerland brought forward to the Southern Interior Local Government Association conference back in Kamloops a couple weeks ago were supported and will be taken forward to the province to have further discussion at the UBCM conference in September. And this is just really our opportunity to share items that are important to our community that sometimes we need help getting traction on at higher levels of government. And the reason as well to bring it forward so our community knows that this local government does a lot of work in the background, helping to forward important issues and that there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And it might be as simple as, sure, we need to look at the produce stickers that are plastics that are in our compost facilities. Yeah, that's a small thing, but it's actually affecting every single community across Canada who has composting facilities. And it's something that we need more than just our local government level of legislation to help change. And so it takes all of these different steps. Servicing agricultural land properties. This is a huge thing that this council has talked about long before I was on council, about trying to get more funds from our provincial government to help support the agricultural lands in Summerland and to help because our tax base is limited to support our roads and infrastructure. And I just think it's really important for people to know that this is a big part of what goes on in the background. And it's an important part of local government. So a couple other ones went forward about grant processing timelines as well, about how we want our upper levels of government to be accountable to the grants that they make available for local governments to apply for that we're then waiting on. And we can't move forward our own projects without these answers. And just making sure people have deadlines. And finally, the last one would be bylaw offense notices. So this is actually speaking to what we really just moved forward. So these are just things I wanted to share, and that's all I've got on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting just from our last discussion point of how many bylaw offense notices were up against that $500 limit, but very few of the MTIs were up against the limit. So that kind of illustrates the need for why we need to increase the limits for that. Councillor Peak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I also like to emphasize the fact that this council over the years, not just the council we sit at today, has always used the tools that are available at hand. That is the lobbying that we can do with our motions through SILGA and through UBCM, and more recently going to FCM as our representative, the mayor has. And those are opportunities for us to move the issues and concerns that we have in a way that can make an actual difference. So I'm very pleased that we continue to do that. And the opportunity to emphasize that doesn't come very often. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the next item is the UBCM minister meetings requests. I just want to bring this forward. So we have to have those requests in by the end of June. So that means our next council meeting will need to make a decision on who we want to make a meeting request for and for what reasons. So if we could all think about that in time for our next meeting. And corporate officer, do you want people to forward ideas to you? Would that be helpful? So then you could bring those to us at our next meeting. Yeah, okay. So if anybody has ideas, if you want to talk about them now, you can, but.
No, I guess it's not necessary. I have gone through them, identified different ministries and what they do. It's useful that they sort of tell you what each ministry and each department within each ministry handles, so you know who you might want to speak to about any particular issue. And there seems to be cross-jurisdictional issues, I think, which then gives them the opportunity to tell you to go talk to somebody else. But anyhow, I will work with Kendra on what I think hopefully we can present.
Yeah, and on one of those cross jurisdictional ones, like the ALR taxation one that we've just had the resolution passed at SILGA, I think that's one that's traditionally been bounced from municipal affairs to finance to agriculture, and nobody wants to actually talk about it. So perhaps that's something we should request a meeting with Premier Eby about. So if it's a cross-jurisdictional thing, then well, let's talk to the Premier. So we've never, it's been years since we've met with the Premier. So, Councillor Barkle.
Yeah, along that lines, you remember, I'm not sure if you were there when we were speaking with Rolly Russell, MLA from down south there, and his experience at the minister meetings, and he really emphasized that you've got to leave them with a one sheet of what your issue is and your points, because his comments to us is that he's gone back, been in meetings, gone back and looked at his notes, and they were quite different than what the assistant to the minister had prepared. And that's the way you can be ensured that you're getting your points as you want them to the minister and more importantly, perhaps his staff.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Peak.
As per your discussion on Rolly's presentation, he said, if you have a whole list, he said they take the least of it and tell you, oh, we've helped you because we're doing this one. So you don't do the least list, you do the most important list.
Okay, so we just need a resolution to accept those two pieces of correspondence. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor. That carries. And the public comment period. Would like to make a comment to the public?
Hi, Summerland, Brad Besler. I just want to clarify, earlier in the meeting, Councillor Barkwell said that I appeared as a delegation as an individual. That's not true. I appeared on behalf of the Summerland Watchdogs. I included that in my initial application. That was mentioned during my appeal. That was mentioned today. I did not appear as an individual. And just to make the comparison, Sally Pierce was a single person who appeared today, but she didn't appear as an individual. She appeared on behalf of the chamber. So it just seems like staff removed the fact that I represent the Summerland Watchdogs and made it just that I'm an individual, and that's not true. So I just want to get that on the record. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is just just speaking from the last council meeting where council received.
Sorry, you just get
Robert Hacking, 7720 Prairie Valley Road. Just in response to a delegation the council asked me, I just want to make a couple comments. Do not forget that dog owners are also residents. We're also taxpayers and we're also park users. We have legitimate family recreational needs, and Peach Orchard fulfills that with the dog park. For dogs of many different needs, Peach Orchard is the only fenced place where you can safely run and exercise in the summer. The dog park doesn't actually displace anyone. It uses a lesser portion of the now much cleaner grass field, makes the park more inclusive and more welcoming to families and tourists. It adds to the amenities that are already available there. A small group of residents up above hate the park, claim it's a constant disturbance, but then in the next breath say it's virtually unused except for a few dogs and owners and a waste of space. It can't be both ways. Dog owners make a convenient target to divide the community, but this is a public green space for people to use and enjoy, not to be left empty. Over 10 years of study have gone into finding suitable locations. Suitable sites are already well known. And one of these sites, Peach Orchard, is proving to be extremely popular and a well-loved location, even if it isn't perfect. In 2020, council rejected other suitable cost-effective locations and then looked at Dale Meadows. In 2021, when that report came in after much staff effort and no small expense, council balked at the $127,000 cost that it would cost to implement. It's a waste for council to ask even more of staff and the tax dollars, retreading old ground for cost prohibitive fantasies. You've heard the feedback. The dog park is popular, very well loved, and makes the community a better, more welcoming place by being there. Take this opportunity to celebrate what the community has embraced, make the park permanent. Then council can move on from this issue, and so can Summerland.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address council?
I'm Pamela Ayotte, 7720 Prairie Valley Road. And I'm speaking on in regards to the delegation that was here prior, and I got to put different glasses on. So I'm sharing a letter from one of the dog owners. She wanted me to read this to you today. It's from Kathleen Estabrooks. I want my voice to be heard in the ongoing controversy surrounding Peach Orchard pop-up dog park. I've lived in Summerland my entire life, 59 years, and I know for a fact that this beach has been underutilized for all that time because of high water table, the geese, and not so nice beach. The corporation has maintained it all these years through lawn watering, etc. The water park improved its community engagement, and the small dog beach improved its community engagement. Now the pop-up dog park has improved its community engagement even further. With improved use comes noise. This is inevitable with more people using it. There are assets all over this community that cater to groups in Summerland, and we all pay through them, may never use them. The pool, ball diamonds, pickle courts, the arena, the skate park, the schools. Through my provincial dollars, the boat launches, the list goes on. And I recognize that as a taxpayer I will never in my life be a skateboarder. What a wonderful asset the skate park is to those that use it. Though I will never in my life be a ball player, what a wonderful asset our ball diamonds are. Though I'll never be able to afford a boat, those are many that can. Though I'll never be a parent, what a wonderful asset our schools are. I'm not an ice skater or curler, but I recognize these are important assets for many in this community. I will never begrudge my tax dollars being spent on these. Please do not cater to those who tell you the pop-up dog park is a misuse of land. Finally, it is being used, and it is the use that many taxpayers in this community are so happy to have. Don't let a few dissuade you. The taxpayers that take advantage of this asset, including me, are over the moon to have this. Don't take it away, please. Thank you.
Thank you. She sent that to all of us. We have it.
Okay.
So, anybody else, please? Do I press this?
Hello, my name is Arthur Vandershank. I live on Peach Orchard, or just off Peach Orchard Road. I'm going to sort of narrate a bit about my current and past use of this park area for dogs. Maybe about 5 years of use. Until this fenced-in situation was put in place, I and several others were actually using this sort of vacant section of the park, even in spite of water issues, typically in the spring with certain sections. This is all fundamentally a grading issue. I watched trees that got planted drown on the western end of that section, which is now dog park. So a given day, I'll call this past his prologue. A given day would involve driving there, parking, and taking the dogs through the field in the off season. Such a situation as that would involve occasionally picking up dog feces, and most typically, I might add, from around the walking area, the sidewalk that surrounds this section. Because maybe about 1 out of 3 people using that sidewalk were walking dogs, and some of them were lacking in the appropriate material for picking up dog feces. I and several others would, in fact, scour the area for dog feces and litter. I would guess that about 1 out of 3 people using the sidewalk were walking dogs then. What that really means is that our dogs would occasionally interact with pedestrians.
Just have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay, my fundamental point is that this is also for people using the sidewalks, walking their dogs without contact in the middle of the field. And consequently, fencing it has been of great benefit for those citizens who do not want to interact with dogs. Mine were spontaneous and enjoyed by many strangers, but not all. I recognize that, and I had to train them accordingly. I'll leave it at that. This is what you can expect, however, if this dog park isn't recognized as such. It will continue to be a dog park.
Okay, thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to speak?
My name's Elsie Williams and I live at Tuscan Terrace. I use the dog park. I use it twice a day. I take my dog there. I've spoken to many other people who take their dogs there. A lot of them are elderly women who walk small dogs, and they have voiced their concerns about the dog park being changed to a location that may be up in the hill or maybe out of town that they would not go because they wouldn't feel safe. So I think one of the priorities here is to make everybody feel safe when they're walking their dogs at night. Not everybody has big dogs that protect them. Most of these people have small dogs. So they feel that Peach Orchard Park is the right place for them. The second thing I'd like to say is the other day we were down at the dog park and there was a huge family gathering and the kids were playing soccer in the field. And I asked one of the family members if they minded the dog park being there. Excuse me, because we had heard that people don't use the park because of the dog park. So I asked them if they minded the dog park being there and they said absolutely not, because some of us have dogs. We take our dogs and our kids. They all have fun. The dogs get to run and then they can sit over here with us and relax and the kids get to play in the grass and there's less goose droppings than there used to be. If you go to Peachland, they now have a dog walking volunteers around their beach to keep the beaches clean from the geese. We don't have that. We only have our own dogs. And now that our dogs are down there all the time, there is very little goose droppings at this end of the beach where the dog park is. If you go up to the other end, where you swim at Rotary Beach, that has more goose poop now than it used to because the dogs aren't up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Hi, my name is Trina, and I also live at Tuscan Terrace, and I wanted to address some of the complaints about the noise. I've never heard any noise from the dog park. We use the dog park daily, and I just feel it's an asset to the community. There's less geese now. People are using the green space beside the dog park more, and the kids, because when the dog park wasn't there and there was so much more geese, you couldn't even walk through there. And it's not safe. Even the dogs, if they get a hold of the goose poop, they get sick. The kids get sick. The water's contaminated. The beaches get closed when there's a lot of geese. So anyway, I'm just in favor of the dog park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Mervin. I live at Tuscan Terrace and I own a dog and I use the park regularly. And I want to say that I never hear any noise from the park. You hear the odd dog barking, but the water park is far noisier than the dog park would be on the busiest, loudest day. And I just think it's sad that, I think what really the people in Tuscan Terrace don't like is the look of it. And especially when all the grass got, dug up, it did look awful. But now that it's been reseeded, and it's growing, it looks really nice. And there's a lot of people that use it and families as well as, single people. So I just want to say that I've never heard any noise that would be disturbing come from the dog park. And I'm outside walking my dog regularly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Don't see anyone. So I'd like a resolution to close the meeting to the public in pursuant to sections 91C, E, G, L, and N of the Community Charter. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts.